Thanks very much. For all of you who want to change the world, I wanted to talk about how to build a beautiful organisation. Because unless you can build an organisation that has the structure, the balance, the integrity, the strength that's necessary to do something truly great, all your good ideas will come to nothing. And as I prepared this talk, I was thinking about my favourite quote from Steve Jobs about doing something insanely great. Life is too short to spend your time doing anything that is not going to be insanely great. And I suppose it's much more poignant today than I realised with his passing yesterday, that life really is too short. So this is for all of you who want to change the world and dedicated to Steve Jobs and all the crazy ones, as his ad once said, the crazy ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world, because they're the only ones who can. So when I think about trying to do something insanely great, it must be one of two things. Either you're trying to solve some really huge problem the world is facing, or you're going to create something of exquisite beauty, something that is insanely great just because of the inherent beauty that it has. And in the arts, whether you're a great writer, a great musician, a great architect, creating something of exquisite beauty is something that you leave to the world that can be insanely great. For those of us trying to change the world, though, I think we also need to create something of exquisite beauty, and that is the beautiful organisation. The organisation that has the geometry, that has the structure, that has the balance to achieve the great thing that we set it out to do, and I want to talk about that today. The first thing about the geometry of the beautiful organisation, to me, is the first place where 99% of organisations fail. We've been having this dopey debate for the last century or more about which is better, the public sector, the private sector, the community sector. In my mind, they're three legs of a stool, and none of them are particularly exciting on their own. 99% or more of organisations self-characterise themselves as being on one leg of that stool or the other. I think most of the great organisations that change the world have the attributes and benefits of all three of those sectors. You must be a mission-driven organisation. Everyone in the organisation needs to be passionately committed to what it is that the organisation is setting out to achieve. Great community organisations are mission-driven, they're participative, they're inclusive. But many community organisations, worthy as they are, have a small vision and small resources and an inability to have an impact of the scale that we want to have, no matter how worthy the aspiration. And that's where we turn to the public sector that has that scale of impact, that has the sense of the common good about it, or at least ought to. But then we get bound up in bureaucracy and 100-year-old organisational structures that don't serve the challenges we need, and then the ideologues say, well, it's really all about the private sector. There are great things in the private sector too. You can build competitive, tough, disciplined organisations that have access to resources and can create wealth and create more resources. But the beautiful organisation, it seems to me, is in the middle of those three. The geometry of that is an equilateral triangle, and rather than try and stick on one or other of the corners where you want to be is in the middle. It's a bit like, well, I talk about the politics of the radical centre. Amartya Hasiani coined that phrase, getting away from these dumb old dichotomous debates between bosses and workers and profit and the planet and those types of things. When I talk about the politics of the radical centre, people say, well, give me an example. And I say, well, here's a good example right here in Australia. You know, in 1970, we had the worst road toll in the world. Terrible carnage on our roads. 3 decades later, we had the lowest road toll in the world. It still needs to get lower. But that was radical change by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think anyone here could tell me that it was the work of some great ideologue of the left or the right. It wasn't about ideology, it was about practical but radical solutions to a problem. And when I think about some of the other challenges Australia has, I think about early childhood education. All of the data now is very clear that the most important time in life is the first 6 years. The development of non-cognitive skills, the capacity to build relationships, to communicate, to negotiate, to understand. And yet that is where we invest the least amount as a country in our young people. And it's where there's been the least debate. And in fact, a guy called Eddie Groves just hoovered the whole thing up into a thing called ABC Learning before anyone had realised what was going on in the world, into the biggest childcare empire in the world. But I don't think there was much mission there. There was a lot of government money, so it had some public policy contact. It was a crap business. He borrowed $3 billion of someone else's money and the thing went broke and delivered poor quality service to the students. So the first beautiful organisation I want to share with you is one that fits in the middle of that triangle. It's called Good Start. It's a consortium that we put together, a group of non-profit organisations who bought ABC Learning from the ashes of what Eddie Groves had left behind. We bought it for $100 million, he paid $3 billion for it, so I think we're in front so far. More importantly, I think the kids are in front. The kids are getting further and further in front, and the organisation is driven by that mission and that mission alone, to develop our young people to be all that they can be, and particularly in those crucial early years. So it has those characteristics, a mission-driven organisation, built in fact by organisations in the community sector, the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, Mission Australia, the Benevolent Society, Social Ventures. But with a scale of impact that is at the scale of public policy. This is a huge, huge organisation that has a material impact on the lives of Australia's children. And yet it's run with business discipline. In fact, it's a much, much better business now than Eddie Groves ever built. The only difference is we're using the profits to plough back into the children themselves, the staff that serve them, and research to work out how to do that better. It's a much better business because we're Bambi and they were not. Childcare is a really simple business. There's two drivers of the economics of childcare. There's occupancy levels and staff costs. At 70% occupancy, you're gasping for air. At 80% occupancy, you're printing cash. Just like hotels and airlines and all those sorts of businesses. And your biggest cost by far is the cost of your staff. But because we're a mission-driven organisation, two things happen. One, parents are a lot keener to have their kids go to a Good Start service now, knowing that it's there for their benefit. So occupancy levels are going up. And we're a non-profit organisation, so we don't pay payroll tax, so that's 6% lower costs. So you're an organisation that cost us 1/30th what it cost Eddie Groves, delivering much better results for children, and being a much better business. So that to me is an equilateral organisation. It's right in the middle of mission-driven, public policy impact, business discipline. That's how you build a beautiful organisation. There's plenty of them out there. The Grameen Bank, I won't go through, many of you know it. Bringing microcredit to women mainly in developing countries, helping them build their own business to reinvest in their families and their communities. An extraordinary thing. Probably done more to relieve global poverty than any other organisation or any large bureaucracy. Community-oriented, mission-driven organisation, public's scale of impact, and a great business. Turns out those women were a great investment. The company I now work for, Better Place, we have a simple mission. It's to end the world's addiction to oil. Nothing good comes from the world's addiction to oil. Not for the planet, not for our peace and security, not for our economies, not nothing. And so, you know, don't clap me, clap Shai Agassi, our founder. He came up with said our mission is to end the world's addiction to oil. How are we going to do that? Well, unless you can get the cars in the world over the next 20 years to go from internal combustion engines burning petrol to electric motors running on renewable energy, we are not going to get what we need to do here. We spent 2 years creating the thinking behind how to do that. So we're a mission-driven organisation. No one goes into work at Better Place in the morning for any reason other than they want to end the world's addiction to oil. But we are looking to have public policy scale impact. As we take Australia's 14.7 million vehicles from petrol to electric in the next 20 years, that will have a bigger impact on emissions reduction, I think, than any other single project in the country. And yet it's a cracking business. Better Place has raised more venture capital than any other tech startup in the world in the last 2 years. You know, it costs 3 cents a kilometre to use renewable energy to drive an electric car a kilometre down the road. It costs 15 cents a kilometre for petrol. It's nuts. So we believe people will be able to drive vehicles that are faster, quieter, cheaper and greener. That will be a great business, but it is an equilateral organisation. So that's the first thing to me about the beautiful organisation. It has a balance, it has a strength, it has an integrity about it, like an equilateral triangle, but right in the middle of it, not out on the corners. There's another beautiful shape in nature and in mathematics called the golden rectangle. The most beautiful quadrilateral is not a square, and it's not any old rectangle. It's a rectangle that has a particular ratio between the sides. You can see it in architecture, you can see it in art, you can see it in modern capitalism. You can see the golden rectangle everywhere you look. And in fact, that ratio you can also derive mathematically from something very simple called the Fibonacci series. Each number is the sum of the previous two numbers in that series, and that then leads to a constant ratio over time. That series you see replicated in nature, in nautilus shells and in flowers. So there's something very simple and beautiful about the golden rectangle. I think there's a golden rectangle in building beautiful organisations too. The long sides are the ideas and the people. If you don't have those, nothing else matters. But unless you hold those things together with strong culture and values and good governance, the best idea and the best people may ultimately fail to achieve the mission that they've set out to achieve. But you must start with the idea. Most organisations fail at the second hurdle as well, which is they start with a mediocre idea, a quite good idea, a halfway thought through idea, and they get impatient and they want to go and execute it. You need to have a brilliant idea, an idea that can stand scrutiny from all comers, that can answer any objection. And if it can't yet, then listen to the objections and learn and develop it until the point that you know that it's bulletproof. Now sometimes that happens quickly, sometimes it's brilliant, sometimes it's boot polish, usually it's both. I cooked up the idea of boring ABC learning in 30 seconds and called a bunch of people I knew who cared about it, and fortunately it turned out to be a really good idea. That was quick. The work to put it together was hard. When Shai was dreaming up Better Place, he spent 2 years analysing, researching, trying out ideas, testing what worked, what didn't, ethanol, hydrogen, electric cars, how are we going to do that, who's going to pay for the battery, how would that work? But when it was finally born, it was an immaculate conception, because the idea and the interlocking set of ideas was so powerful. So you must start with a brilliant idea. If you don't start with that, you're wasting your time. So Michael Young is probably one of the great social entrepreneurs in the history anywhere in the UK, founded the Open University, the Consumers Association, 60 different organisations, not all of which succeeded. But he said any great idea should be able to have a self-sustaining organisation built around it within a couple of years. If it can't, it wasn't a great idea. So you must start with a great idea, and unless you're confident you've got an absolutely world-class idea, then keep working. It's a big idea, but that's elegant, simple, powerful, makes sense. Then it's on to people. All the cliches in the world about, all of our most important assets are our people, but of course it's true. The forward indicator of success for any organisation is the people that are in it. Sometimes you focus solely there. The Weizmann Institute in Israel, one of the greatest scientific research organisations in the world, has only one rule: hire the best scientists. That's it. Their philosophy is that the best scientists are probably interested in the most interesting problems. The most interesting problems are probably also the most valuable problems to solve. And if you can solve those problems, there's probably someone out there who wants to give you money to keep doing it, whether that's a government or a business or a philanthropist. And lo and behold, that's what they do. They have more patent licensing revenues than the entire Australian university sector combined. So that focus on people seems to be working just fine. So those two things are the long arms of the golden rectangle of a beautiful organisation. If you don't have a brilliant idea and world-class people, you will never do something great. But if you have those two things, you need some things that hold it together on the short sides. The first is culture and values. The great joy of being the founder of an organisation, and I'm a serial offender, I've done 8 so far, I've done a few more actually, 8 successful ones and a few that weren't, in all 3 sectors, but mainly in the middle. The great joy is that you get to create the DNA of the organisation when you start, the culture and values of the organisation. So, this guy's got an interesting philosophy. He says most companies put shareholders first, customers second, employees third. He thinks it's the other way around. If you have happy, engaged employees, they'll probably deliver great service to the customers, and that'll probably end up making money for shareholders. It's a different set of culture and values. A Better Place, one of the things I say to our people, particularly the people that are not at the most senior levels of the organisation, choose your own boss. If you don't like the one you've got, choose a different one. It's a free market out there. You get to choose who is your champion, who's the person who's going to deliver and mentor for you the best. This is Monty Python, if you can't see it, that wonderful scene. You're all individuals. I'm not. So when I was at McKinsey, which is a great organisation with a great culture, one of its central cultural values was the obligation to dissent. No matter how junior you are, you not only have the right to dissent and say, I don't agree with that, or I don't think this is right, you have an obligation to do that. You have an obligation to stick your hand up. It's something we try and live by at Better Place. No matter who you are in the organisation, if you think we're wrong, we've got the wrong answer, we're behaving in the wrong way, you not only have a right, a protected right to speak up, you have an obligation to do so. That's a central cultural value. One of my colleagues was working at Morgan Steel, and one of their central values was, 2 heads are better than one on the big problems. What's with the old military command and control kind of, I'm the big chief and I get to make all the decisions? That's dopey. If it's a big decision, let's involve a bunch of people in it. Let's make sure we look at it from all the angles. So that's a central cultural value for us. The big decisions are made by groups of us who care about solving the problem. That's culture and values. That's what leaders do. Leaders set culture and values. Founders of organisations are critical in that. But the final part of my quadrilateral, my golden rectangle, is governance. The most boring and least attractive. When I was in Silicon Valley, I saw more startup organisations fail through failures at the governance level than any other reason except probably running out of financial runway. And every entrepreneur I ever met who had problems on their board thought they were the first person in history to ever find this problem. The job of the governing board, of the governance of the organisation, the people you put on it, the structure of how that happens is incredibly important, particularly if you've got the other three sides right. Because let me tell you, as they say, success has 1,000 parents. It also has 1,000 alternative owners. And if you build something truly great, there's a whole lot of people who like it to be theirs. Most frequently, whether this is community sector or public sector or private sector, the people who work there tend to like to be theirs. They tend to take it over. The managerial class, as I call it, tends to take over the organisation. Senior management make more money for themselves and less for shareholders and less for workers and less for customers. Public sector workers sometimes have it all running the way they like it. A good production environment, but not a good public outcome. Even in the community sector, sadly, sometimes you see organisations that are really more run for the convenience and benefit of the people that run them than the original mission. So one of the jobs of the governance of the organisation is to ensure it stays true to its mission. That it's protected from raiders. I talked about Crimean Bank now. Now you've got these clowns in the Bangladeshi government who've thrown out the founder, Muhammad Yunus, because he upset them politically. So the governance and structure of the way you run the organisation is the final part of the beautiful organisation. So those are my thoughts. If you want to change the world, if you want to do something insanely great, you need to build an organisation that has that geometry, that has the strength and integrity and balance of an equilateral triangle, and that has the shape of the golden rectangle with long investments in people and great ideas, but held together by culture and values, the DNA, and protected by good governance. So for those of you who haven't yet got that mission, who want to do something insanely great, I start here. John Roscoe, who's on the opposite side of politics to me, but John said something I thought was profoundly true. He said, if planes were falling out of the sky, if 1 in 10 planes fell out of the sky, we'd consider it an outrageous tragedy, completely unacceptable. But apparently it's okay for 1 in 10 schools to be failing completely, destroying the lives of the people that we have entrusted to their care. Apparently that's okay. Apparently it's okay, it must be, because no one has changed this in a very long time. Neither side of politics, not the teachers' union, not the academics, not the ideologues on any side. It's not because they don't care, but they haven't got it right. So I think it's time for us to figure out what are the beautiful organisations we can build in public education that bring the benefits of all three sectors, that bring new culture and values and brilliant people and brilliant ideas to changing that problem. And for those of you who don't have a mission yet, I encourage you to think about that one. Thanks very much.